amended scheme for the remediation of defective blocks. Reliance upon the standard IS 465-218 is unfit for purpose. It assesses superficial damage, not structural stability, and needs revision based on the best scientific evidence available on pyrrhotite sulfate attack. Engineers have downgraded a recommendation of full demolition of properties to partial demolition or remediation. Partial demolition, which we've heard from experts, is saying is a long-term disaster. We've seen one home from Paris, one of the semi-detached houses demolished as defective, while the other was left to stand despite displaying defects. We've seen houses partially demolished and reconstructed around walls which have not yet displayed signs of damage, and foundations are not included in this scheme. Science shows deterioration can spread from defective blocks to seemingly healthy blocks, which have been left behind in walls or foundations and could be concealing a dark secret. Individuals, families and whole communities are experiencing significant distress, including high incidence of mental health issues amongst those affected, and this was raised very clearly by Deputy Charles Ward last night in his motion. 30% of homeowners have suicidal tendency. This is a study done by University of Ulster, and 40% have severe depression. We all know the importance of having a safe, secure home cannot be overemphasised. And I would urge anyone to go up and have a look to Donegal and see the absolute devastating consequence. It's heartbreaking to see the homes where people are sitting in their homes and they're crumbling all around them. And Charlie Ward knows this firsthand himself. But none of this fault is the fault of the affected homeowners. They bought or built their houses having faith in the system, in the regulations which are supposed to protect people, but these systems failed. The danger is that they may continue to fail if this scheme is not addressed properly. Producers say that these blocks are fit for standard, but how can we have faith in those who are certifying them? And often the quarries are self-certifying their own blocks. So what steps are the Department of Housing taking to ensure quarries are adequately audited and that government inspectors, not quarry owners or employees seeking material for inspection? The pyrite remediation scheme applied in Leinster provided the perfect model upon which to build communities. This was an end-to-end scheme delivered by the housing agency who procured contractors, managed the works and paid the bills directly with no upfront cost to homeowners. At the moment, we've seen this in Donegal, it can cost between €700 to €1,200 to get initial building assessments and several thousand to have inspections, tests and reports carried out. These costs, along with the cost of a rebuild, are refunded if the work is approved, but the homeowners have to come up with the cash in the first place, and the banks are not giving out loans because they know that the houses are unfit and that they're crumbling. This disaster has been described as a slow-moving earthquake, and the response should be treated as a response to an earthquake. The crisis needs to be addressed as a whole and not as a series of individual misfortunes. There are between 20,000 and 30,000 homes negatively affected by defective concrete blocks in the North West. So thank you, Minister, for coming in, and I would urge you and the rest of your department to instruct the department to carry out a full assessment of the challenges faced in Donegal and to empower the housing agency to provide an optimal end-to-end state manager mediation model, like we saw in Leinster with the pyrite, to relieve families of the financial and administrative burden of remediating their home.
Minister Sullivan.
Thank you, Cahill. And I want to thank Senator Cosgrove for bringing this up, fellow West Cork person. They're very proud of you down in West Cork, and it's an honour to take this commencement matter as we fly the flag for West Cork here in the House of the Oireachtas. But look, I do sincerely thank you for raising this. I know that you have been up to visit those impacted. You've seen how these houses are crumbling. You've seen the psychological impact that it's happening. So you're coming from a very well educated place in terms of what you think needs to happen. As the Senator is aware, the Remediation of Dwellings Damaged by the Use of Defective Concrete Blocks Act 2022 commenced on the 22nd of June 2023, which contains the current grant scheme, and the related regulations were adopted on the 29th of June 2023. And I note that you referenced the pirate remediation scheme, and I can confirm that this approach was considered in the development of the DCB grant scheme. However, it's not comparing like with like. The scale of both schemes is different, and the homogeneous nature of the damage caused in the PRS relative to the DCB lends itself to the approach taken. It should be noted, an implementation steering group for the current DCB grant scheme has been in place since 2023. The group comprises of officials from relevant local authorities, the Department, the Housing Agency, and the Homeowners Liaison Officer, and provides a useful forum for discussion and feedback on operational and emerging matters around the scheme, and draws attention to issues faced by applicants. Under the Act, homeowners may submit an appeal to an independent appeals panel where they are not satisfied with their determined remediation option. I understand that the appeals panel is issuing determinations to appellants and is expected to accelerate its work in the coming weeks. In October 2024, an increase to the scheme was provided, bringing the scheme cap to €462,000 and an increase in the scheme rates of between 7.4% and 8.7% was approved on the 7th of November 2024. In November 2024, following receipt from preliminary results from scientific research in Donegal, the Department announced changes to the way the scheme works for certain homeowners. All homeowners who have been given a non-demolition option, known as option 2 to 5, have been offered a choice of continuing with their work on their dwelling under the option determined, or the option of a full technical review of their application by the Housing Agency once the full review of the national standards is complete. I understand that the National Standards Authority of Ireland are progressing with their review of the IS 465, which will publish an update on their website when available. Furthermore, under Section 51 of the Act, the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage is required to commence a review of the operation of the Act within 3 months of the completion and review of IS 465 by the NSAI. A report to each House of the Oireachtas of the findings and conclusions resulting from that review is required not later than 3 months after the completion of the review. So, Senator, that last part there, I see that as the opportunity, perhaps to examine how the scheme is working, to examine, is it having the impact that it should have, is it addressing the issues that it should be addressing? And I see once the NSAI publish their report, and the Minister then is obviously compelled then to provide a further report within 3 months of that report, that may be the opportunity to address some of the issues that you're talking about there. And look, there is a commitment, and Minister Brown has said this repeatedly, there is a commitment to keep the scheme under review. I see that as an opportunity to amend where necessary.
Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for your, for obviously displaying a real interest in it. I suppose just looking at the non-demolition option, like the non-demolition option isn't working because like I said earlier on, that if there is a defective block, that it is actually going into healthy blocks, and that it mightn't be people might know it. So demolition is the only option. And this is what people want. And I think people don't, like, particularly people like we'd say, Senator or TG Charlie Ward, he got elected based on this, and there's county councillors got elected based on this because they feel like they're not being listened to. I understand here at the end that, that there is going to be a review, and I suppose we have a model that does work, and that's what the homeowners want to see in Donegal. And it's not just affecting homes, I suppose, expecting early year centres, community centres. Like, there's whole communities are being affected by this. And it is a crisis, and I think that needs to be honed in on. Like, actually, Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin referred to it, saying that it's often called mica, like that there's 3 levels of it. Like, mica would say is in this level, it's like a cancer. Then pyrite, which happened in the East Coast, is next, and pyrite is the one that's at the very end, which is happening in Donegal. And the impact of the crisis that, I don't think anyone realises the full extent of it, that the crisis that actually is there. But thank you for your time, and we'll definitely look into having this review and looking into how to use this. Thank you.
Thanks again, Senator. Look, and you raising it here and highlighting it does, again, broaden the awareness of the impacts that it's having. And we were chatting earlier, we were talking about the technical element of where you're only partially rebuilding, that there's a risk of the pyrite, I suppose, seeping into the new blocks, which will have an impact. So that's why we have to keep the scheme under review, which is exactly what we're saying in the answer here, that the scheme will be kept under review and how to improve it. And the government approved priority drafting legislation which will provide for the increases in the grant scheme, cap and rates that were announced last year and that have applied to all new applicants since that time, to be extended to a wider group of homeowners who incurred eligible costs under the grant scheme since the 29th of March 2024. In addition, Minister Brown plans to make a number of other amendments to the legislation to the scheme can be continued to be applied in as efficient and equitable as manner as possible for all homeowners. This legislation is being progressed as expeditiously as possible, and the bill is included in the autumn 2025 government legislation programme for priority publication. So there is new legislation coming for this session of the sitting of the House of the Oireachtas. which we hope will progress. And I again see that as an opportunity to address some of the issues that you're talking about there, as well as the National Standards Authority of Ireland report, which is due to be published very shortly.